Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week I invite a guest from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights and tips to help you increase profits, reduce costs and drive efficiencies. If there's a topic you would like covered or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie and perhaps we'll be chatting here one day soon. And my guest today is a professional speaker, fashion entrepreneur and hat historian. She's the founder and owner of The Hat Historian, and she's the founder and owner of The Hat Channel. I'm delighted to welcome Tricia Hamilton to the You and Your Business studio. Hi, Tricia.
Hello. Lovely. Thank you.
Hi. There we go. We've got you there. I gather we're going to be talking about hats at some stage, so we'll keep that. And I believe you may be changing during the course of the show, which is perfectly all right with me as well. As I do it each of my guests, I take you back to your last year of school, and we were just talking a bit about that. For somebody who, you didn't kind of put yourself down as highly academic, but you found yourself heading off into that world in a different way. Would you like to tell our listeners about that?
I did. I went from school to teaching, and my headmistress suggested it. So I went into teaching. I went to Homerton College and did a degree in maths and physics to teach at secondary level, because I was guided to go to secondary. I wanted to teach primary children, but they suggested that the subjects really lent themselves to going to secondary. So I studied at Cambridge for 3 years.
And okay, so you were steered off in towards maths and physics. But what was the sort of motivation for primary school children to be teaching them?
Well, I think for me, because I'm very creative, I love the energy that young children bring. They come with open eyes and wonder. When they're a little bit older, if you're going to teach a maths lesson, they've got an idea of what's going to happen. The format is set, whereas if they're younger, it's really a sort of slightly open book, which I loved.
Grand, open minds, fantastic. So maths and physics, so you were doing that. How were you at that? Did you take them on that trip, those students you had?
I did, because while I was teaching, we moved into maths, which was investigative. And that for me was a dream. For most maths teachers, they hated it because you had to write an essay on a journey, a maths journey that was a problem, but it was open-ended. And that to me was a dream, because it's like, okay, you've got a maths journey. There's no set route, although you have to follow the logic of what you're doing. And it's written as an essay, and obviously calculations as well. So for maths teachers, it was a nightmare. For me, it was a dream.
Tell me a bit more about that. Tell our listeners a bit more about that. I'm not familiar with the concept of the maths journey.
Well, I'm not sure what they do now, but at the time you had a problem. So it might be to get from A to B, but you a certain budget and you've got a certain time. So in order to work that out, you had to be a little bit creative as to how you were going to do it. Now, it might be that you were going to generate a time machine, which of course would be way off the pattern. But for me, it was like, I love it, but you've got to be clear as to how that's going to work and what the time zones are and how each part of it would work. Whereas the most common answers would be, that you'd go and get a train and you'd follow the bus timetables and all the things that were quite anticipated. But, when you have these sort of open-ended questions, which we do even now, because we're looking at moving children's thinking up, when you've got an open-ended question, it's like, where is it going to go? And I love pressing those buttons and saying, well, actually, you try it. So for me, and when we were trained as well, the Trish, you hit the button on the head. You know what you're doing, and because I loved English as well, it absolutely matched. Although I didn't study English at university, I then went on and did an English qualification to teach English as a second language.
Right. I mean, it's quite fascinating because if you think of the practicalities of what you were doing with that sort of maths question, it was really forming people's minds for problems of the future in terms of business.
That's right. That's right. It's a really good model to move forward. But it's not sort of just open and imaginary. It has to have a foundation and be clear. You know, if you just say, well, you know, get into a time machine and go, you're not going to get many marks. You know, you'd get 1 mark for the idea, whereas you have, like all mathematics, you've got to do the layers and say, well, actually, this is how it's going to work. You know, are you going to move forward in time? Are you going to move backward in time? What's the strategy? You know, how is that going to look? So it's a lot more. You want the explanation of the mathematics in there as well.
I think that's fantastic. Actually, I think that'd be a great tip for business leaders and their management teams, just to sit down and tease those sort of problems out in their own minds, just to explore their own creativity. Yes,
that's right. It is a good way because I mean, for me, I still use it because I think outside the box, and it isn't the way that other people necessarily think. And, you know, it raises eyebrows, but I just go with it.
Why not? Why not? But you were to be successful in moving on to the sort of teaching of the primary end of the school business. Tell us a bit about that and how that all sort of panned out for you.
Well, I was teaching, where was I teaching? Oh, I moved to Hong Kong, and there was an opportunity to do a master's with Exeter University as a distance student. And so I opted into that program, and I wanted to do it in primary education. So what I did was to do maths and language. So I was looking at the development of the mathematical language that children develop. So, you know, when they're 7 and they don't always know the technical mathematical language, how do they find those answers? And they sort of bounce around the ideas and explain what they mean. I mean, that's what children do. They explain what they mean in a sort of roundabout way because they don't know the word for it. And that was actually my main focus of study. It's like, this was really wonderful for me. So I was teaching mainly 7-year-olds, and they just have such exploration. You know, I would set homeworks that were open-ended. I said, okay, you've got to plan to do something, and then you've got to, you know, ask for it to be brought into your home. I remember once I was doing a fruit face, and I got them to design a fruit face. But you've got to go and you've got to ask your parents to get these fruits and create it, photograph it. And I had one student that did it to an amazing degree, but he was a very, very clever student. Age set, well, any age, he's got his doctorate now. But you know, at the time, he was quite naughty, but he needed to be pushed into that level. And he asked for corn on the cob because he wanted to use the strands on the outside of the corn. And he created a sort of Archambolan, I think it's Archambolan, the guy that does all the fruit. Yeah, so it's got a name like that. I can't quite remember. He didn't copy any of that. He did it all from himself, and it was like, this is unbelievably stunning. And then they photographed it, and I said, and then you eat the fruit and the vegetables because, you know, because the whole idea is not to waste food. You know, it's you want to set the parameters. You know, eat healthy but don't waste stuff as well.
I think that's great. So you get them to create a character out of the food, and then they have to eat the character. Yeah. That must challenge them.
Exactly. Yeah, but it was good. It was a good exercise. It was planned.
But you seem to enjoy helping these children to explore their own minds. And as somebody who came from sort of a family where you were taught the crafts and were keen on home ec, this must have been a real joy for you.
Yes. Well, my grandmothers both taught me. One taught me to do crochet, and the other taught me to sew. And at the time, I was at a boarding school, so I went in my exeats, weekend exeats, and holidays. I would go to my grandmother's, and you know, that was a joy as well. And those skills never left me. But when I was at school, I had to decide between home economics and physics. And you know,
All right.
you had the lines. I don't know if they even do that now, but you know, you couldn't have physics. It was in the same line as home
All
economics.
right.
So you know, there was no. If you were a physicist, then you weren't going to be. You weren't studying well, different subjects. I mean,
I know
so
what you mean. Yeah, you had to make a choice between them. Yeah.
yes, those crafts. And because I was good at physics and maths, it was a sort of no-brainer, really. Yeah.
But really, it kind of stifled the other side that you would have liked to explore at that particular time.
Yes, yes, for sure. I wasn't, you know, I didn't realize that my creativity was being pushed out, but I never felt it was pushed out. In as much as I would always be creative at home, I was always making things. You know, birthday parties. It's like, you know, I can explode into creativity. What's happened? You know? my children remember lots of birthday parties that they had, and I would be doing, you know, teddy bear ears and what all sorts of things. But on the other side of that, I would also experiment on my children when I was teaching. That sounds bad, but no, they would do some of the science experiments that I was going to do with the 7-year-olds for
Right.
me. Just make sure this is going to work. How's this going to work? And my daughter goes, "Why is your science so much fun?" And you know, I just don't like what I'm doing in my classroom. But it's an interpretation, because you have to follow the same syllabus. It's a bit more rigorous now because you don't have that wriggle room as much as we did then.
Yes.
But for me, it's just tremendous to be able to, you know, get children's fingers in the water and just explore what it feels like. You know, you don't have to study nature unless you're under a tree and, you know, the leaves are falling while you're there. You know, so much better.
Yeah. It's amazing. Actually, you reminded me of something in my past. The best sort of biology teacher I had was somebody who used to just take us out on walks and start talking about nature as it was happening around us, and we were totally engaged with it.
That's right. It is so special. I mean, there's lots of trips now, and you have sort of forest schools and all sorts of lovely things that give children those experiences. But it was different at that time. So yes, I love to be able to make the children, you know, explore it in a real way, and do a bit like, you know, the open-ended investigations. Okay, we'll just explore. You know, you've got different, you know, selection of little soaps. You know, how are you going to make the most bubbles? You know, what is it you're going to do? You know, and they have to work out how they're going to make the bubbles, because you can't do one where you're whisking it all up and the other one only gets one whisk. You know, you've got to be fair and everything. It's like, okay, well, you know, you can work this out. The same drop of soap that you've got, you know, you've got to have the same amount in each one. You've got to blow for the same amount of time, or you've got to whisk it at the same, you know, all these things are, but it's all learning, you know, and
Yes, of course.
trying to achieve was, you know, how they're making the bubbles. What's in these bubbles, you know?
But you seemed also very keen from the whole creative side of maybe staging and theatre and costumes. That seems to be part of your life that you enjoy very much.
Yes, I think for me, you know, even when I was teaching, I would say to the children, you know, the audience, the rest of the class would be the audience, and one child or a group of children would be telling a poem. And I said, okay, well, let's set this up so that you can see what it actually means. So I remember when I was teaching in Bahrain, I had a little 7-year-old, and he had a frog poem that he'd written. And I said, okay, imagine that he is green, you know, from head to foot. And they're all going, oh, Raj, we weren't expecting you to be green, but, you know, okay, we can go with this. He's a little tiny chap. And he grew sort of about 10 feet tall, because, you know, he was now this little green frog, well, quite a big green frog, because we were saying, you know, all of you.
Yes.
And those poems went from poems to songs, because they were written they were done to music as well, not by me, but by another colleague, a teaching colleague, and it was performed on stage. So this little green image that we had turned into a green image, frog hands, and you know, he had a frog hat on as well, big bulging eyes, and you know, to take it from that to that was wonderful. And I was saying that I had when I was doing a literary topic in the with the 10-year-olds, it was the House of 60 Fathers, and it's all set in a sampan. So I said, okay, let's build the sampan. They're going, you know, we're 10, you know, we can't build a sampan, you know, that well, they didn't say don't be ridiculous, but their eyes told me, you know, it's like, you know, their eyes roll, you know, we see this at home, don't we, in sort of,
Yeah.
the eyes roll and the mouth sometimes stays shut and sometimes it opens. Of course, I was teaching them, so they kept their mouths shut. I was like, you know, what is she on? But I could see it, and they eventually set up this pupil size sampan that 4 of them could fit in and move with the water. It wasn't in water, but you know, there was water around it, simulated fabric and stuff. And the language that came out of that was magnificent, you know, because they were emulating the story. It's like, well, what, they didn't have dialogue to work with. It was like, well, what would they be saying as they're moving along in the water? So they were creating it from that place. And for me, you know, sort of that sort of theatre imagination, but to explore it in such a physical way as well. It's like, you know, you're moving in this water, you know, they would put on clothes and get into character as well. I love it.
Fantastic. It's great to explore people's mind. I think there's a lot of lessons there for business people as well, in terms of, you know, let your mind go, but create the circumstance around it so that you start believing it yourself and just seeing how it plays out.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you don't think it's going to work, you can't imagine it. It's not the right route for you. I mean, as we have hundreds of ideas, and how many of them land? You know, well, some of them you're really grateful they don't land, you know, because they weren't they weren't the right ideas, you know. But you know, the ones that can land, it's like, well, how's that going to work? I mean, if it's a high cost, you have to really think it through. But if it's something that is just a tweak and a change, it's like, well, could that work? Yeah.
I never say it's never a mistake if you learn something from it. You know, it's only a mistake if you keep repeating it, and that causes the problems. In terms of where this was to take you next, as I see you changing hats for our audio listeners, you don't see that, but you'll see it on the video. You discovered you had a passion for something in particular.
Sorry, I was teaching.
Yeah.
And then what were you? Where were you?
Well, I was going to kind of mention hats, seeing that they seem to fit into your life a bit.
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in hats. I used to play with hats. First hat I made was when I was 6, so it never really went away. When I was teaching in school, I would always make the hats for any play. It's like Tricia will do it, you know, sort of they send over some fabric and overnight it would be transformed into a hat. So for me, the hats have always been there. And as I traveled the world, it was like, this is such a lovely place to be. You know, you've got hats that are extraordinary, and then the background of where they've come from. I mean, I lived in Hong Kong for 20 years, and so, you know, the Chinese had hats that the men wore amazing pieces, and they would all be decorated, and every decoration meant something, you know, and
right.
that was that sort of thing. It wasn't really just coming from, oh, I'll work with hats now. It was, I ended up doing a hat business, but it was sort of like a latent passion, and it's like, oh, I can actually work this. I might have to take this off because I'm going to disappear. That one's going to go. We'll move to the next. Yes, we're sort of imagine we're on the cam now. So
you're wearing a boater at the moment, is it?
I am the boater was in the I think it was 1845. The first boaters were worn, and amazingly, they were worn by children and women, and it was about 30 years later that men started wearing them. Now, in most cases, because every hat has a story, it's been amazing that since I've been working full time on hats, there are even more stories. I mean, I knew a lot about different hats, but then I go into the detail of it. It's like, I didn't know that. You know, it's like, what else is there? I mean, even I thought, well, I wouldn't bother with hats like a hard hat, because it's just a hard hat. But it turns out it's got a history, and they used to be called hard-boiled hats. Now, I haven't had a chance to fully explore that. I think it's because of the material, that the material that it was made of was boiled. But of course, you've got the boiled egg as well. So it's like, I'm not sure which way that's going to pan. But, you know, then there's the chef's hat. Now, the Port Blanc, the big hat over here, it's also got an amazing story. And a lot of chefs don't know all those stories. Well, there's some sort of hearsay stories and some more concrete stories.
Urban myths and things like that.
Exactly. Well, yes, for sure.
So this, I mean, talking about finding a business in this. So as you said, this was for you when you were much younger, a sort of hobby, and you loved being involved. But you've decided to turn this into a business. What were the challenges around that?
Well, taking it from an idea into a business, because the hat historian, I was working in hat history, but to actually take it to the level of a business, I talk about hats in a professional sense. So I go and give talks about hats. So it's the hat history, the type styles of hats, and hat stories. And what I hadn't fully appreciated was that every hat has a story. It's got a past as to where it's come from, a lot of the shapes, not all shapes, but some shapes. It's got a current picture in as much as you bought it or it's been given to you. And it's got a future, because you don't know what's actually going to come next. So I give talks on hats. And from that, the hat historian angle, I then decided to open the hat channel, which is everything hats. It's like hats that people might want to buy, what hat's going to suit you if you're thinking about buying a hat. And what people don't think about is, whatever hat you buy, you're never going to get rid of it. What you didn't realize until you had the hat, that you will never throw it away. So it's really important that you pick the right one. If you absolutely hate a hat, then, not that I hate this hat, I'm going to change. If you don't like a hat, the worst thing is the only thing you will do is either give it to somebody else who it might suit better, or you'll give it to a charity shop. But it never takes its route from your collection to the rubbish. So it's really important which hat you have. So the hat channel is all about making the history accessible. And what I do is, I don't generate it, because I have a hat channel magazine. I write all of the articles for the hat channel magazine. And what I try and do is take the little grasps of history and make them come alive. And
where can people find out more about that?
If they just type in the hat channel, they will find the hat channel magazine. And
is that .com or .co or something?
.com, thehatchannel.com. And they can also go on Instagram to the hat historian. If they just go for me, then I can guide them. And it really gives them a chance to see, hats that, what to do with a hat. If you put it on, you can work the hat. And quite often we just try on a hat and we go, oh, no, that doesn't work. But if you work it, there's an opportunity to see whether it's whether it's the right hat for you. Um,
I
and
suppose when I think of hats, straight away, I'll think of an Irish person, Philip Tracy.
yes,
Uh,
yes. Well,
a really,
he has a gift with hats. I mean, he's got such a good knowledge of the materials, and like all milliners and hatters, you use the shape of somebody's face. You don't want anything that's got a too small a brim. You know, it makes it look, it has to be proportioned against shoulders. You've got the formal hats, which I've put on, and then you've got the informal hats like the Baker Boy. You know, Peaky Blinders now are sort of very popular, and all sorts of different hats are out there. But what we're doing now with the hat channel is you've got your hat and your mask to go together. So although we're all looking at masks as independent, to get a hat, to get a mask that goes with your hat is just a lovely activity.
explain the mask piece to me. I'm not
Well,
familiar. Do you mean an actual real mask?
an article because the magazine came out today, because it comes out every month, and the mask I've got one company I'm working with, and they've tailored the mask. It's called Savile Row masks. And
Oh, you're talking about these masks for the lockdown and for and which, yeah, I was thinking to myself, you know, what sort of mask? I'm with you now.
No, the lockdown mask, you know. But the point is that we have to wear them, and if we can find something that really works with a hat or with your outfit, it just takes it to another level. Currently, we're all just managing. We're just getting into masks, but if you look at the magazine, it gives you a little bit more information on masks, and obviously you've got PPE, which are for the medical people, but you also want to protect yourself and your family as much as you can.
So it's about protecting yourself and being stylish at the same time.
Exactly, it's really important. It's the go-to accessory for 2020. And you heard it.
And probably for the future, based on what we're seeing around us.
Well, I think that's right. But you know, you have an opportunity now to pick out some colours, because you need a number of masks. One's not going to be enough, because you're going to have to wear them every time you go out. And I think that's the way forward. And you know, I just think we can do so many things with the masks, and I've got all these visions like, well, it doesn't have to be a plain, ordinary, you know, throwaway mask. It can be something that will wash. It's a little bit sustainable, and you can enjoy it as well.
Well, it's fantastic. There's a whole new industry. It's just been set up there, and somebody creative like yourself, it looks like you're right in the heart of it at the moment.
Yes, well, you know, for me, I really try and, with the Hat magazine and the Hat channel, we have to reflect of what people are doing. I mean, in lockdown, I had a lockdown bumper special. I have a hats at home section, which is all about upcycling your old hat. So
Right.
I've got an artist at the moment painting a hat. So we're going to have that featured. I had a florist working with me generating a floral garland, and you know, it's just like take your hat to another level, because your hat's going to stay, and if you want to do something else with it, then come and have a look.
Fantastic. For our listeners, in the last 30 seconds that we've got here, yeah, you're saying don't discard that whole hat. There's a new life in it yet, if you want to be a bit creative.
Exactly. You know, it's really important to keep the hats. They are all in your cupboards. You just have to find them and bring them out and have a play.
And give them new life. And I must say, thank you very much, Tricia Hamilton. Fascinating conversation, particularly around hats. And it's thehatchannel.com. I'd like to thank Tricia for her time today. I'd like to thank Sam on Sound. And don't forget to join me, Alec Drew, again next week, right here on You and Your Own Business on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Look forward to seeing you next Friday, 12:30, same time again. Many thanks. Okay, stop recording now. Stop.